And now, for the week of December 19th, Photoshop TV is on the air.
Welcome to Photoshop TV from the National Association of Photoshop Professionals. And here's your hosts, the Photoshop guys, Scott Kelby, Dave Cross, and Matt Kloskowski.
All right, welcome to another amorous episode of Photoshop TV, produced by the National Association of Photoshop Professionals, or what we like to call just NAP. Anyway, we are sponsored this week by Wacom, makers of the widescreen graphics tablet. Go to Wacom.com and go wide.
Yes, and iStockPhoto.com, makers of the world's fastest growing collection of royalty-free photography. Check it out at iStockPhoto.com.
Well, welcome everybody. We're glad to have you here. I'm Scott Kelby, and joining me in the studio, as always, the other Photoshop guys, Matt Kloskowski.
Welcome back, everybody.
And all the way from Canada, representing the entire country of Canada all by himself, Mr. Dave Cross.
Good day, everyone.
Well, we've got a really, really great show put together for you this week. We've put a lot of neat stuff together for the holidays. We've got lots of tips, and we've got news, and we've got a contest, and other stuff about the contest. Who won last week, who might win next week, that kind of stuff. And we brought lots of tips. I brought some tips this week. First, I've got a tip later on in the show about how to a very cool way to add your signature to photos. And I also brought a little kind of nip and tuck kind of thing for the holidays. If you overate during the holidays, I'll show you how to trim those holiday photos back down to size, a little tummy tuck kind of thing going on.
Awesome. Well, I have a couple of tips also. I have one tip which is a very interesting and yet adventurous way to add a border, and I call it that because you never quite know what's going to happen when you use this technique. And I also have another idea on how to make your type look a lot more grungy, kind of roughened.
Grungy.
And Dave, I do not have an adventurous tip this week, but
well, only one per show.
I'm going to show you how to straighten your photos using a new feature in Photoshop CS2, and I bet you haven't seen it before, so it's not what you think. It's
oh,
different.
It's so what you're thinking.
Yeah.
No, it's not.
I've seen it. It's very cool.
Very
so,
cool.
I'm going to show you that. I've also got a lot of good news for you this week, and we'll take a look at a few very cool websites.
All right, so we got a lot of cool stuff this show.
Cool.
And we also have got a very cool contest this week because
Yes, we have.
We're not going to tell you who won last week's quite yet, but check this out. This is this week's prize. This week's prize is the baddest bag ever made. It's by Book, so go to bookbags.com and check out this bag. I have this bag. Dave has this bag. Matt has this bag. We all have this bag. You might have this bag. That's how cool this bag is. But it's not just the bag. The bag is a great gift on its own because the bag costs about $124,000.
Right.
No, this is
Canadian. So,
Canadian.
You know, like
So it's about
118
Yeah, 118 US. No, I have no idea what the price is. But anyway, it's an incredible bag. But this bag, this particular one, comes with stuff.
Give me. I'll
He's
hold
going to
you
hold the
take
bag.
it out.
Thank you. Let's take a look.
At that.
Let's take a look and see what's inside. Let's see. Wait a minute. What's this? Is it Dave Cross's Photoshop CS2 Help Desk book? Yes, this will be in your bag. There'll also be a Photoshop TV T-shirt in there, right?
Oh, say it's not so.
And you know what? Just winning all that should be enough, but there's more.
Dave's going to
for the
autograph the
holidays.
book too, right?
For the holidays, there's also
Wow.
Photoshop CS2 upgrade for Windows. So if you're lucky enough to be a Windows user and win this, you get an upgrade to CS2. If you're a Macintosh user, you'll be on eBay. So we've got all of that inside this bag if you've got this week's question. However, it is time for a tip, and we always like to start off. Now, last week we started off with Dave doing a tip, so it's only fair to have one of the Photoshop guys. Oh,
This
Dave.
week I'm going to show you how to hand off a bag to Dave.
There we go.
There you go.
Just and
What a great
talk
tip.
about the tip that I have coming up. Now, this week I'm going to show I guess now I'm going to show a tip on how to take your photos, how to trim down your file size using when you're kind of working between different photos. So let's go ahead and take a look. Okay, so let's say that you are posting a bunch of photos onto a web gallery and you got them all off your camera. Obviously you need to resize them because they're going to be too big just to put onto the web the way they are. So what I'll do here is just take a look at the file size real quick. Go image size and see how this photo is very, very large. It's way too big to put onto the web. So I'm going to create a smaller image. I'm going to drag this photo into it. Let's create a new file here. I'm just going to do 640 by 480. And it just opens up a blank document. I'm going to take a picture of my buddy Scott and Jeff here. And I'm just borrowing pictures from Scott and Jeff. I'm stealing a tip from Dave's book, by the way. And I'm just going to take this picture, I'm going to drag it into this other photo here. And obviously it's way too big for the photo, so I'm going to zoom out a little bit, press Control-T, that brings up Free Transform. And then here's a little trick here, press Control-0, Command on the Mac, and that kind of fits the Free Transform box to the screen. And now I'm just going to resize the photo and then move it until I get kind of the photo frame the way I want. Remember, 640 by 480 is what's going on the web, so I'm just going to resize it. That's all I want. I just want Scott and Jeff in the screen here, so I'm going to kind of center it there. But here's the thing. Take a look down at my file size here. See, it says 4.7 megabytes. Well, that's because if I go to Free Transform again, look at all that area on the outside. The photo is still there, so if I want to, I can still move this thing around. If you want to trim down your file size the quick way, just select all, Control or Command A, go to Image, go down to Crop, and now take a look at my file size here. It's right back down to the entire size of the document.
Well, thanks, Matt. First of all, I'd like to compliment you on a wonderful choice of tip from such a great source as that. Just one of many. I'm not even sure if it's in that book, but he said it was. So now my tip's a little different because often when we do tips, we give you very specific instructions and you always get the results you expect. But remember, I introduced this as an adventurous tip because you never quite know what's going to happen. Let me show you what I'm talking about.
Dave doesn't even know what's going to happen.
That's right. I actually don't. I sort of have a rough plan in here. But what I'm going to do here is create an interesting kind of a border effect. And what I do, first of all, I just duplicated the background layer. Just press Command or Control J. And I did that because I didn't want to damage my background layer, of course. So I'm going to actually use the lovely Extract command, which of course is probably going to bring up a giant-sized dialog box, which yes, it did. So I'll try and make it at least remotely small enough. And what we're going to do here is normally use Extract to take, this is my son, we usually try and take him out of the picture, but that's not what this is all about. This is about making weirdo borders. So here's what I do. I just get a nice small little brush, and I'm going to click once in the top corner, hold down the Shift key, and click in the other corner, and then just continue doing that until I've created this little border all around the outside of the image like this. Now, if you are prone to experimentation, you could change the thickness of these borders and so on, but just to show you the basic idea, once you've done that, you fill the middle part, and you get this weird, green with the blue in the middle. And when you click OK, at first, of course, you're not going to be able to see anything because I have to make it visible. So let's just add a new layer below and fill that with white. You can see, wow, look at that. What an adventurous border that was.
Adventurous.
And I did not know what was going to happen because it's all dependent on the thickness of that line that I created with the highlighter tool. So that's what makes this so interesting. Now, one of the great things about that whole adventure with that tip is everything you do might change something. The thickness of the highlight, drawing several lines, you just never know what you're going to get, and that's what makes it such an adventure.
And all the edge puns that you get to do also. That's quite a bonus, the edge puns.
No question about that.
All right, so thank you very much, Dave. We've got a lot more stuff coming up. We've got, of course, the Nat Minute with Larry Becker. He's here to give you that a little bit later. We've got some more tips. We've got the contest. But first, we've got Matt Kloskowski and the Photoshop News.
All right, thank you, Scott, for that wonderful intro. First up, Russell Brown. Now, you've seen him at Photoshop World. He's the zany guy with a ton of Photoshop tips and tricks. Well, he's got his own Photoshop podcast now. It's called The Russell Brown Show. You can go to iTunes, do a search in the podcast for Russell Brown. You can find it, or just stop by Photoshop TV, and we'll put a link to it there. Also, Alien Skin has announced a new plugin called Exposure. Now, essentially what Exposure is it kind of brings the look and feel of film to digital photography. It's not supposed to be out until, I think, first or second quarter of next year, but you can just check back to Alien Skin's website. Also, Photoshop Cafe, Colin Smith from Photoshop Cafe has actually redesigned his website, put a lot of cool tips and tutorials for Photoshop on there. So again, we'll post a link to that on photoshoptv.com, but the website is Photoshop Cafe, so you'll want to stop by there and check out Colin's tutorials. And finally, Epson is expanding their curriculum for 2006. The Epson Print Academy will now offer 2 full-day tracks. So you can go to epsonprintacademy.com and you can find out more details. So that's about it for the news this week. Back to you guys.
Thanks, Matt. Now, Matt will be back a little bit later to answer some questions from the blog. But first, Scott, I believe you have a tip to share with us once again.
I do indeed. I have a tip to share with you once again. This particular tip is basically a way for you to get your signature into Photoshop in a really, really easy way. Now, first off is, how do you get your signature into Photoshop? Well, you can, of course, scan it. You can write your name on a piece of paper and then scan it into Photoshop. You can certainly do that. Or if you have a Wacom tablet that...
Find out more at www.wacom.com.
Thank you, Matt. Wacom, making fine, high-resolution graphics tablets since 1849. Anyway, if you've got a Wacom tablet, you don't even need to scan your signature. Just take the pen and write it right in Photoshop. But we're going to pretend that you actually wrote it on a piece of paper and scanned it in. We're going to pretend you're using technology from the late 1800s. No, here we go. So here's a scan of my signature right here. Now, of course, the lamest thing would be very easy yet lame, is to just drag it into your document, right? And then switch the blend mode of this from normal to multiply, and there's your signature. Okay, that's not the greatest thing in the world. Then you would lower it to a size that would be reasonable. I like on my photographs that size. No, something very small, and then I like to lower the opacity a little bit so it doesn't look like I wrote it with a pen. It's like a pencil, because that, of course, enhances the value of the artwork. Okay, that's one way to do it, but that's not the way I'm going to recommend, because that's not really a tip. That's just a tutorial. That's lame. So here's what you do. Open your scanned signature. Then go right under the Edit menu and choose Define Brush Preset. And then when this thing comes up, go ahead and give your signature a name. I like to name mine Frank. We'll click OK. No, give it a real name. Scott Sig or whatever you want to call it. Okay. It now saves that into your brushes palette. Now, you don't have to worry about getting rid of the white background or any of that stuff, because it does it for you automatically. Photoshop is just that smart. Grab the brush tool now. Let's add a new layer. Just add a layer. Grab the brush tool, and then go up here to the brushes palette, and when you go to the very end, you will see your signature. It looks all scrunched up here in the preview, but it's actually the right size. So let's just go click, and your signature will now always be just one click away, and it'll always be huge like that. Well, it doesn't have to be huge like that. Let's undo that. Just go here to the brushes picker and put it any size you want. Just like that, and let's zoom it in, maybe right there. That might be, I'm just guessing, could be a little small. I'm thinking maybe 27 pixels. This isn't the right size. How about 67 pixels?
This is
Perfect.
another one of those adventurous tips.
It's an adventurous tip, very adventurous, and then we'll lower the opacity, and there you have it. That way you're only one click away from having your signature anytime you need it in Photoshop.
Signature bliss, I call it.
Matt calls it signature bliss. It's a one-click signature bliss.
Yes.
Okay, now on this Tip-a-Palooza episode of Photoshop TV, we have yet another tip from young Matt Kloskowski.
Oh, thank you. All right, so this is the tip that I talked about in the beginning of the episode on straightening crooked photos. Now, if you've got Photoshop CS, well, the convoluted way to straighten your photos is to use the measure tool and then to go into the info palette and get angles.
That's so convoluted.
It's very arbitrary rotate. It's
so arbitrary.
Yes, it's arbitrary. Anyway, thank you, Scott. In Photoshop CS2, there is a little feature inside of a filter that makes straightening your photos a breeze. So let's go in here and we'll take a look. As you can see here, I've got a noticeably crooked photo, and if you look at the horizon, it definitely needs to be corrected. So we're going to use a filter. It's in Photoshop CS2 only. Let's go into the filter menu, go down to Distort, and then go to Lens Correction. Inside Lens Correction, the first thing we're going to do is turn off the grid because it's kind of annoying. And then check this out. Look along the left-hand side. You'll see a bunch of tools in here, and there's one called the Straighten tool. And believe it or not, that straightens your photos.
Wait,
so click on that.
That's crazy.
It is crazy. So click on it. I'm going to zoom in on the photo a little bit. And the way you use this tool is you click and you drag along a surface or an area that should be straight. So don't try to make it straight. Just click and drag on that water line there. That should be straight. So I click, drag, let go of your mouse button. And you can see here, it straightened the photo for me. Now here's the tip that finishes it off. Go down to the bottom, go to Scale. And depending on the size and the resolution of your photo, you can probably get away with about a 10% scale here and just scale it just until the edges meet the edge of the canvas there. So you don't even have to go in there, and you don't have to crop it or anything after you run the filter. Click on OK. And there you go, your photo is now straightened. So how much easier is that than having to use the crop tool and the measure tool and the info palette without using that filter?
It's much easier.
I know.
It's great. All right, thank you very much, Matt. And who's coming up next? But the very special part of the show, the part of the show that means so much to us.
It does.
Dave Cross's Photoshop Trivia.
All right, for this week's question, we're going to talk about the code names that used to have. Now, we've talked before how each version of Photoshop in the past had a code name, and one of the most famous ones was Photoshop 4 that had the code name Big Electric Cat. And this week's trivia question is, what was the cat's name and its nickname? And we'll have the answer to this extremely challenging trivia question in about 30 seconds right after this.
Are you a creative professional? If you are, you can't afford to miss a single issue of Layers magazine, the how-to magazine for everything Adobe. Layers gives you amazing tutorials, tips, and tricks that help you master Photoshop, InDesign, Flash, and the entire creative suite. We also give you enough creative inspiration to turn your next project into a masterpiece. Available on newsstands nationwide, and visit us online at layersmagazine.com. Save over 50% off the cover price when you subscribe online.
All right, so the answer to our trivia question this week on the Big Electric Cat splash screen, what was the name of the cat? And the answer is Udo.
Udo. Oh, I thought it was Mr. Whiskers.
No,
Ooh.
good guess though.
Oh,
now the other part of the question was, what was the cat's nickname? Because he'd have a nickname. Any
Was
guesses?
it Mr. Whiskers?
No, it wasn't that either.
Dog.
The nickname of the cat was Becky, I guess, based on
Becky,
Big
of
Electric
course,
Cat, or
makes
BEC.
so much sense.
There you go. This week's Photoshop trivia question. And keeping with our today's whole cavalcade of tips, here's Scott again with another tip.
Thank you, Dave. Hey, a cavalcade, you know, that's just a term you don't get to hear that often. So, yes, a cavalcade is the way to describe what we're doing today. I have a cavalcade of tip coming up here. This one is the one I talked about a little bit earlier. It is a way to kind of trim your holiday thing. I don't know what that means, but let's open up a photograph that we want to make look a little more trimmed. This is actually a photograph of Matt.
Hey,
Sorry.
I would never wear a shirt like that.
That's true. When Matt wears a shirt like this, it's much shorter.
I know, I show more
He
midriff.
likes the bare
Yes,
midriff,
yes.
absolutely. No, come on, obviously I'm kidding. This is clearly a photo of Dave.
Oh,
so
ouch.
we're going to fix this thing up, and we're going to use a filter you might not think of using. We're going to actually use the Add Noise filter. No. We're going to use Liquify. Now, when I open the Liquify dialog box, it's rather huge, so it's going to not fit all on the screen at one time, but that's okay. The portions that we need are all visible. We need the 6 tool down in there. Now, it used to be called the Shift Pixels tool, but now it has a new name. Now it's called the Push Left tool.
All right.
Okay, so get the Push Left tool.
Got to
Well, you
hand it
could-
to those guys for ingenious
Hey,
tool names.
that could have been a trivia question right there. Where do you find the Push Left tool?
Oh.
Okay. Here we go. So here's what you do. You get the tool, get a nice big brush, and you can change your brush sizes, of course, using the bracket keys on your keyboard. And all you do is go where you want to shift the pixels, click, and just drag up. And look at that. The love handles tuck nicely away. And that's quite a big move here. We'll just do a little bit more over here. Now, here's the thing. You want to make sure you start at the bottom on the right side and move up, because if you go downwards, it becomes the Add Goiter tool. So let's undo that. Okay, now, that's how you do the right side. You push it left. On the other side, on the left side, you actually do want to go down. And as you go down, you can see it just tucks it in just like that. So that's a quick way to get rid of those excess holiday pounds. I'm going to go ahead and click OK here, and you can see there's a little before and after. It gets a little bit drastic. You'll want to use a little more decorum, a little more taste when doing that. That's kind of a hack job, but now you know exactly how to get rid of those extra holiday pounds using Liquify to trim things down. So now you have the solution to your holiday digital liposuction needs. Now, as you can see, the image I'm using is an image from iStockPhoto.com. Now, this is why I thought this was Matt when I first opened it up, because
I'd like to know.
if you hide the layers palette on the stock image, it actually says Matt.
Now I understand.
So it wasn't me, it was in the stock
It's amazing how you
photos.
make these things
It's
just pop up
It's
out
just
of
crazy, isn't it?
anywhere.
All righty. Speaking of Matt, my clever segue of the day. Speaking of Matt, Matt has some questions from the blog at photoshoptv.com.
I do. So this week's question actually comes from Jeremy. And Jeremy writes in that during Matt's tip on using the image processor back in week 6, he clicked on the title bar and the image size, a little context menu popped up with image size in it. And he wants to know, how can he get that? Well, Jeremy, the answer is you can't. Only I can do it.
Secret
And
thing and
it's
only
much
on Matt's version.
It's much like Scott. He just pops up these magical things in the images that say Matt and a shirt that's way too long for me. You just can't do it. No, I'm kidding, obviously. Here's the thing. If you use Windows, the way you get that little context menu, just right-click on that title bar, and you'll get the context menu. You'll see image size. You'll also see canvas size in there. Now, if you're a Mac user, you can't right-click, you can't control-click, you can't do anything on that title bar because it's not going to work. But what you can do, I won't leave you hanging high and dry here, just go under the image size menu, or go into the image menu, I should say, go down to image size, and you'll see in Photoshop CS2 that they added a keyboard shortcut for image size. So just commit that to memory, and now you can open up the image size dialog whenever you need to.
Absolutely right. Option Command I,
Option
right?
Command I.
Okay. Fantastic. Well, thank you for answering that question from the blog.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Also, Jeremy, who is his real name, thank you. Hey, a couple things. First off, if you want to email us, the Photoshop guys, send your emails to photoshoptv@photoshopuser.com. We're anxious to hear from you. If you'd like to post in our blog, visit photoshoptv.com, and all the links, of course, that we mentioned on the show are on the blog, as well as our website. Also, want to say hi to some of our viewers from around the world.
Yes.
We read the blogs all the time, and we have viewers. We had to write these down because there's so many.
Yes.
We have viewers in Australia, from Beijing, China, Amman, Jordan,
Denmark,
Poland,
Sweden,
New Zealand,
all over the place.
Heidelberg, Manchester, UK. Thank you all
Thank
so
you.
much for posting in the blog. It really means a lot to us to be able to read your comments, and don't forget to send us emails as well. Now, Dave Cross is back again. Tip-a-palooza continues with a great tip from Mr. Dave Cross.
All right, I'm going to kind of do 2 tips in one here because last time I did a tip with type and for some technical, weird, glitchy problem, didn't quite show up properly on the screen. So I'd like to first of all show you that.
You guys got mad at me for doing 2 things in a row
But that's
last
because
week.
last week it didn't work properly because otherwise I wouldn't do it.
Hey,
so
Dave, that's an interesting choice of word. Are you going to use weed next time?
hey, if you like, that's what we're going to do. So the first part of this tip is what we did last week, which was a way to add a filter to your type without actually having to rasterize. So what I'm going to do is add the texturizer filter to a new layer, and then I'm going to use, they can do this in various ways. You could either go in here and choose Create Clipping Mask, or press the keyboard shortcut Command Option G or Control Alt G, or you could do it in the Layers palette as well. And the point of that whole thing was, what that lets you do is show that you can still have what looks like a filter on your type, but the type is still quite editable.
There we go.
So there we go.
Nice.
Now, what we want to do though this time is take it a little step further. What if you want not only the filter on top of the type, but you want the edges to look a little more roughened like? So here's what we're going to do. We're going to make a selection of our type, holding down Command or Control, depending on your platform, of course, and click right on the thumbnail to load that as a selection. I'm now going to go to the Select menu and choose Modify. Whoops,
Modify
Modify.
the cannabis filter now.
Contract, that's the next one. Well, because it is legal there after all. So we'll contract that by a couple of pixels, and all we'll do is add a layer mask. Now at first it looks kind of funky because we've just cut out part of our type, but what we're going to do to just take this to a whole nother level is apply the Canada filter. No, wait, what is it called? The brushes. What do I want here? Oh yes, I want brush stroke. Sorry about that. I love when people go all over the screen like that when I'm watching a tutorial. Okay, we're going to use the spatter, but we're not spattering the type. Remember, we're spattering the layer mask, but we're not going to do it that much because that's just like you've had too much weed. We want just a little bit. There we go, and as you'll see now we have this nice coolio little edge on here. Now, this is not really a live effect because if I needed to alter my type, I'd have to go through and do those steps again, but it's a real quick way of adding a nice little kind of a grungy effect to your type. Now, the only thing about this little tip is the fact that the type, you can't really change it on the fly because, of course, the layer mask wouldn't line up. So here's what you could do. The first time you do it, record an action. Record an action of making a selection from your type, contracting the selection, adding a layer mask, and then applying the filter. And that way, if you do need to change the font or something, throw away the layer mask, change the typeface, and then just run that action.
Of course, then the action says something like hemp or ganja or something like that.
Hey, if you like, this whole tutorial is taking a trend that's just all too familiar for us Canadians. But if you do it that way, make an action, then it's very easy to change it after the fact. Now, at this point, what we'd like to do is share with you the latest news from the National Association of Photoshop Professionals with Mr. Larry Becker, and something we like to call the Nap Minute. Larry?
Welcome to the Nap Couple of Minutes. I'm here with the editorial staff today, and they're actually in an editorial meeting. We put together a couple magazines, and I want to introduce you around the table. Guys, can I have your attention and introduce you to the entire world? They're all watching Photoshop TV. Barbara and Chris is here, and Kim and Cindy and Mike. And they're all part of our editorial staff, and they put together great magazines like this for Nap members. This is Photoshop User, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about this. And you guys also edit other magazines. What else do you have here? Layers magazine. Thank you, Chris. Okay, back to work, everybody. Photoshop User magazine is on its way to all of the Nap members. And what you're going to find is a couple of neat articles. One's written by Matt, but Matt actually had some help from the inside at Adobe and got a couple of engineers to help talk about the Script Event Manager. That's our feature article this month. Also, Katrine Eisman and Sean Dugan have a great article on digital darkroom. A couple other things specific to Nap. We also have the Digital Canvas Awards that are wrapping up right now. You can still enter until the end of the year. So at midnight on December 31st, you can enter. It's a little less expensive for Nap members, but everybody's welcome to enter. Go to digitalcanvas.com. And also I want you to know about something that's happening with Epson. Epson is putting together classes on how to print from Epson printers, and Nap is sponsoring this, and there's a special deal just for Nap members that sign up for one of these Epson classes. And so if you go to the Nap website, photoshopuser.com, you'll find out how, if you sign up for one of these special Epson classes, you get a copy of Scott's DVD, How to Show Your Photos Like a Pro. That's it for the Nap Minute. Back to Matt.
All right, thank you, Larry. One thing I got to mention before we move on to the contest is I'm going up to New Jersey with my family over the Christmas holiday here.
So meet him there.
Yes, exit 9. No. I'm going up to New Jersey. I had to book a rental car for 8 days. So went to the budget website, booked the car. I didn't book it, but I looked at the price, and I remembered that Nap members get a discount for budget. So I went to the Nap member website, got the discount code, plugged it in. I got $40 off of an 8-day car rental. I mean, nice. I never really thought that.
Well, he always rents a limo too,
yeah.
so
the Escalade with the spinner.
He likes to drive it himself. It's weird.
No. Anyway, so definitely, if you're a Nap member, check out those discounts because there's a lot of things in there you might not know about. Also, that $40 that pays for half of your Nap membership. So plus, you still get the website, also the Photoshop User magazine.
Photoshop User magazine. Did you mention Photoshop User magazine?
Well, yes, I did.
Let me tell you why this magazine is so cool, because it's the only magazine in the world today where you can read articles from both Dave Cross and Matt Kloskowski, both in the same place.
And Scott Kelby.
And the three of us. So if you like the show, get the magazine. If you hate the show, get the magazine anyway, because there's other people in there too besides us.
Tired of seeing that.
You don't have to actually watch us. You can just read us too.
Absolutely.
So
okay, contest time. Let's talk about who won last week's contest.
Right. Well, first of all, you have the winner, correct? If you remember last week, the question was we showed you 2 layers palettes, kind of a before and an after, and we wanted you to tell us how do we do that? What was the way that we changed that? And the answer was Command-Option-Shift-E was one acceptable answer, or Control-Alt-Shift-E. This was a multi-answer thing, because if you were on an earlier version, you could also have thrown in the fact that you could do Command-Option-Shift-N or Control-Alt-Shift-N to make a new layer first. Phew! That was a long answer. And the winner was?
The winner was Andrew Malone from Inman, South Carolina. And I wrote South Carolina thinking Dave was going to read this.
Because I would have gone
Ska. So, congratulations, Andrew.
All right, so what is this week's trivia question? And the prizes again are the book bag,
and the book, and the upgrade.
Book, the upgrade to Photoshop CS2 for Windows users.
Extravaganza package. And the question is, where in Photoshop do you find an option called Count Jitter? And you have to be very specific in your answer.
Count generator. Let me put it this way. It's on the front of a cereal box, isn't it? Is that correct?
Could be.
Could be. No, it's in Photoshop?
It is in a Photoshop
The
portion.
crop tool?
No.
Don't stop giving away answers. They
All
have
right,
to find it out for
so-
themselves.
Where do they send the answer to?
Photoshop TV at photoshopuser.com.
And you can also send, of course, all your questions and comments about the show. That wraps up this episode, this salacious, amorous, ambidextrous episode of Photoshop TV. Thank you guys for watching. We hope you'll tune in next week. Now, next week, we're doing our mini show, right?
That's right, the
Nothing
little
but
holiday,
tips.
nothing but tips,
That's
quick
right.
and to the
It's
point.
a little mini show because, of course, it's the Christmas holidays and we want to spend time with our family. We know you want to spend time with your family and you don't want to spend a bunch of time learning Photoshop.
Not at that
So
time
we're
here.
compressing it into a mini show. So make sure you download it next week, our mini show. But then after that, sometime after that, maybe the next week, maybe 3 weeks, 5 weeks later. No, we'll be right back with another 30-minute show sometime after that. Have a wonderful holiday season. Thanks, everybody, and we'll catch you next time. On behalf of myself and Matt Kloskowski,
Happy holidays,
who is
everybody.
rocking the house ski,
Had to get
You
it
had to
in.
say it.
and Mr. Rootin' Tootin', Dave Cross.
My wishes for the best wishes for the holidays as well.
Thank you, guys, and thanks for watching Photoshop TV.